And welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to try and paint in the most realistic possible way. Realism is also an art movement from the 19th century. I will say a little bit about what that is, tell you a little bit about what that is in the video, but we're going to focus on realism in art. In many ways it has different meanings. From the internet, realism is a way of portraying or thinking about reality. The word realism is used in many liberal arts in many different ways. So, such as in music, painting and philosophy, it usually means trying to be true to reality. And that is what I want to try to do today. I want to kind of move away from that more painterly, expressive style that I love so much and that you've probably seen in my work if you've been following this channel for a while, or if you follow me on Instagram or wherever. That is my goal, to get as expressive as I possibly can. A lot of artists who are more known for their more abstract or cubist work, just to name one, Picasso, also had the skills to paint super realistic work. And sometimes I wonder whether that is where it all stems from, where I need to have that to then be able to develop my style in other ways. Like that is the core of everything. Maybe it's not. Can I do that? Can I get into those nitty-gritty details and make something look real or more real than it usually does when I am painting? I will show you a few examples of my work just so you understand what I am rambling on about, and then I will see if I can actually manage to paint realistically. Yeah, I am out of my comfort zone. Let's see if I can do this. Remember to bring out your sketchbook and paint right along with me. I have explored with different styles, and as you can see, I go from things that are almost abstract, like this one, where I just like the look of the watercolor melting and blending on its own on the surface of the watercolor paper. But I also have another style, and that is the one that you see here, working super loose with super expressive portraits like this one. However, for a long time, and in part still now, this has been my sweet spot, these portraits with added elements. They're still quite expressive. As you can see, some of the skin is made up of blotches of colour and not properly blended in, like this one. I have a landscape, a snowy landscape in the chest, and over here I have birds and plants. The focal point is definitely the face, more often than not the eyes, and then I also paint different subjects of different ages and all different kinds of people. Mostly women, I have to admit. I do paint a few men, mostly women, and again experimenting with hard edges and blooms in the background. That is something that I absolutely love. But today I am wondering, how far can I push myself with realism? How can I make my style realistic? Do I want to make my style realistic? No, I don't particularly want to make my style super realistic. But I also think that it's important to have that skill so that you can then kind of step back from it and play with it. So today I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to try and paint something realistic, and I'm going to start off with, I think it's some kind of tiger or leopard, and I'm not quite sure, and work my way towards portraits. And then at the end I will say whether I believe that I am capable of painting a realistic portrait, a realistic painting. I have often admired photorealistic paintings on social media. There are some watercolor artists, for example, who are really able to make their portraits undistinguishable from photographs. As much as I am in awe of people who have those skills, I think the approach to art, the technique, is completely different to that used in expressive and loose painting, in the sense that it is a work of precision and patience with a necessary love to spend hours on details. And if you are a photorealistic painter out there, then do let me know in the comments if I am wrong, but I get the impression that hours or even days may go into painting the details in a beautiful lace collar, for example. I cannot paint photorealistic work. I have not put the hours in. It's not something you learn overnight because you one day decide to make a video about realistic art. However, I have always had that feeling that if I could push myself towards work that was more in that neighbourhood, then I would be free to do absolutely anything with my art. I don't know whether I am delusional, but it is a niggling thought I have now had for years, even though it would be only to allow my style to evolve and not because I want to make realism or photorealism my actual permanent style. Watercolor is a medium that lends itself to realism or photorealism, especially in portraiture, so well. Of course, there is the downside that there is very little room for correction because we cannot cover up mistakes in watercolor because it's a transparent medium. But it's also because of that, the translucency that is so much part of the organic world and of course of human beings' faces and skins and eyes too. With watercolor, the light that shines through, the transition from warm to cool tones can be captured so well. In this leopard, I used a blue underpainting, I hope it's leopard by the way, both to set the mood, to map out the light and shadow and mid-tone areas, but also to use as highlights in the dark stripes and spots. All I will have to do is do some lifting or just don't layer too much colours on top of that blue in certain areas and I will get a reflection of bluish light, for example. And I'm going to stop this here. I do have a temptation to go on working because as I look at the reference image, I see some values, some shadow areas are probably darker and I could go with a bit more variation of colour. But one of the worst things I feel I could do now is overwork this. And I do have a tendency to overwork my pieces or my paintings, whatever you want to call them, if I don't step away from them. So I'm definitely stepping away from this one or at least moving on to a different painting in the spread because I think that I might be on the verge of ruining this one and I don't want that to happen. So moving on. It is a different day, you probably can tell from the lighting, and I will have to clean my palette again because it's a new session. Last night we did this on Patreon for our Lunar Black Tier painting session, which happens usually twice a month, and every session is recorded so you can attend it live or you can watch the recording and paint along when the sketch outline is provided. So for this one, I'm going to use a famous trick of mine, which is just starting off the portrait with some dirt that's left, some mud as they call it, that's left on my palette. And that is something that will break the ice. Have I said this before? If I have, I'm sorry, but it is true. I had to revisit my idea of realism several times while I filmed this video. Realism is an art movement from the 19th century that wanted to break free from the drama and embellishments of Romanticism to depict real life accurately. But that also greatly meant painting people at work, funeral scenes, everyday life. It didn't necessarily mean painting in a hyper-realistic manner. And then in the 60s and 70s, we had hyperrealism with art that resembled high-resolution photographs, focusing on tiny details, surface textures, and subtle lighting effects to create a realistic illusion. As I said, a work of patience and passion. But then I was also listening to a podcast the other day where it said that to cavemen, their paintings of a horse or deer on the wall of their grotto was realistic to them. I agree with that. I have come to the conclusion that realism has various interpretations and that it is subjective. I also like the idea of having one area of the painting leaning more towards realism or photorealism with more details and the rest left more expressive, more out of focus. I think that in itself helps to create a story behind the painting. Looking at these with fresh eyes. Okay, do I think this is realistic? I'm not sure that I got all the proportions down to perfection, let's say, that they're completely exact. And this one is too far, kind of in the mid-zone to be able to tell. Some of the watercolor got transferred over onto the other spread. I really love with this hot press paper having this really clean background. And yeah, I keep on getting graphite smudges and whatnot. I think I'll have to buy one of these little gloves that you put on your little pinky and your ring finger that prevents that, because I find it really annoying when I'm trying to get this kind of storybook look in this specific journal. I'm not getting that look in all my sketchbooks, not at all. If you haven't watched the 3 sketchbook formula video, please do after this one, because it explains how I work in sketchbooks. So some are more polished and some are super rough, super messy. So I will continue painting this portrait, and I might use some turquoise colour to go in. And I find that a lot of realistic watercolor portraits have this kind of turquoise underpainting that really helps them to glow, and an underpainting just kind of maps out where the light and shadow is going to be. It has been used for centuries in art by artists using other mediums like oils and acrylics as well. But yeah, let's go back to painting. When there's a lot of translucency to the skin, I think this colour works really well. I cannot remember the exact name of it, but it's by Daniel Smith and it's an aqua turquoise colour. I will put the name of it in the description box for you to look up. So I really like the effect I got here with that. I was right in thinking that this blue would work in bringing out the translucency of the skin of this portrait. One thing you do need when you're working in a more realistic manner is definitely small brushes. This is a numbered 0. So you can go into the details without allowing things, the watercolor in this instance, to spread over your paper too wildly. And even where you think you see black, don't use black. Go in with a brown or dark red or a mix of brown like burnt sienna or burnt umber and an ultramarine blue, for example, to get a nice transparent black. But do not go in with a pre-mixed black. Try and keep things light for as long as possible. Okay, so let's look at what I've done. Let's look at what I've done different. One, I spent way longer on this piece than I normally would, especially on details, which I wouldn't have bothered with in the past. And there was a lot more controlled layering as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of attention going into the shadow work. So, have I succeeded in painting a realistic portrait? Well, that is definitely, I wouldn't call it a photorealistic portrait. So it does not look like a photograph. There are literally some paintings out there in watercolor, as well as other mediums, that literally look like photographs. You cannot tell them apart. You can tell this is a painting and not a photograph. I don't think I would develop those skills overnight, but I want to push myself and see how far I can get. This said, I'm really satisfied with this piece. I really like the effects I got on the skin and the lips, the hair, and the luminosity of the skin overall. Definitely stepping into the good old comfort zone here, because eyes are my favourite thing to paint, so I think it might be easier to try and get as realistic as I possibly can with a subject that I'm used to painting a lot and that I love to paint. So let's see. It's very difficult for me not to start off splattery and muddy and loose and let everything drip, etc. So what I'm going to do to keep myself from doing that is I'm going to go in with an underpainting again. I think when you're painting the skin, it's important to have an underpainting because it gives the idea of all those underlying layers of capillaries, veins, fatty tissue and whatnot. So we've got to get that in, and having an underpainting is really helpful for that. So I'm really tempted to use this colour again, and I might. So I see a lot of purple around the eye in the reference image, but yeah, I feel that this one really worked a wonder here, and I want to experiment with it more, that turquoise colour. The reason being, when you overlay warmer tones over cooler underlying tones, you are, especially around the eye area, really hinting at what is beneath, all the underlying structure, and again, as I said, the veins around that area. So it makes the eye instantly look more realistic. So let's give it a try. Editing Fiona here again. I can't remember if I said this during filming, but I want to say I did find this exercise extremely useful, and in a way I feel that hunch I had was true. Pushing yourself to notice all the fine details and practicing them won't turn you into a photorealistic or hyper-realistic painter for sure, definitely not overnight, but if like me you aim to be expressive, you kind of have to gain that control before you let it go. This helps you understand where you need to pay attention. It shows you what to let run loose and what to paint in a tighter manner. This balance between lost and found, detailed and out of focus is to me magical. Okay, so which one is more realistic? I think the battle is between the girl and the eye, but at the same time I noticed that I can't get that painterly style out of my style. It's so deeply ingrained within me that I just cannot do that layer after layer after layer of controlled watercolor. It's just something that I don't feel connected to. But I do notice that when you paint, when your aim is to be more to portray what you see in real life or in a photograph, so more like kind of photorealism, which this is nothing like photorealism at all. You have to spend so much longer on the details, and it's like a different work. It's almost technical in a way, more technical. I admire anyone who can do that, really. I think I'm very far from mastering that. But yeah, this was my attempt today to paint more realistically than I usually would. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you will join our Patreon community. We'll be so happy to welcome you there. And that is where everything is happening behind the scenes and all the fun is going on with the live and recorded sessions. Otherwise, I will see you all next Sunday on YouTube. And in the meanwhile, have a fantastic creative week. See you all in 7 days. Bye.